Pat. It's Pat on brands. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. A pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous, flawless, gorgeous, don't be cautious, corners. Making a move, making a hustle, all in the making of borders. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. A pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous, flawless, gorgeous, don't be cautious, corners. Making a move, making a hustle.
Find a volume. Volume. I'm gonna start again. I'm gonna come back again. I like that.
Pat. It's Pat on brands. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. A pat on the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous, flawless, gorgeous, don't be cautious, corners. Making a move.
Thank you. I guess we need a better venue. You know, the sound is not the greatest, but anyways, good evening, everybody. I'm sure by now you know where the bathrooms are, right? I'm not gonna bore you about that. Welcome to the Pattern Brands Dialogues. This crowd today. Where are my day ones? Those that we started off together at Braamfontein when we started this platform. Boomy, don't be shy now. Say hey. Yannick, I see you. It's good to see some familiar faces in the room. For those that do not know me, I am Pat Mahlangu. And I run this platform called Pattern Brands, which I started back in 2016. I was doing the first year of my master's at UJ. And really, when I started it was just a blog. You know, I was writing articles, giving my opinion on brands. I don't know what informed me comment. I mean, at the time, I was young and naive, you know, and somehow this thing called Pattern Brands caught on, you know, and also we moved with the times. So when we started, it was just a blog. Then we started our series of events called the Pattern Brands Dialogues in 2019. So this platform is 6 years old right now. The only year we never held, thank you. Yeah, so when I started this platform, I was still, like I said, at uni. I had no connections in the industry. You know, I was really sort of an outsider, right? And I wanted to create a platform through which young people and the older generation, or not older, captains of industry can connect, you know, through storytelling, because that's why we call in other events, they call them speakers, but we call our speakers storytellers, because we believe in the power of storytelling, because people will always remember stories, not facts and numbers, right? So this platform is built on the power of storytelling. And today, it's a special one because we're talking about all things heritage, right? And we're very deliberate when we chose the lineup of storytellers for tonight's event. These are people that are sitting at the helm of some of South Africa's most iconic heritage brands. I am talking Telkom. Which made this event possible. You know, and I really want to take this time to acknowledge the team from Telkom. In no particular order, Cisco, thank you for making the time. Shadow, also, you know, for always entertaining my crazy ideas. And yeah, I'm glad that finally, you know, we got to do something together. For those that do not know, Shadow, I knew Shadow when she was at her previous employer, and we started engaging. And I was still pitching there. We never got to do something together. So I'm very excited that finally, Shadow, you know, this came to life, and I'm eternally grateful. Then we also have African Bank. You know, Sbu sitting at the helm of African Bank, and I hope he'll get an opportunity to tell the African Bank story, because I think every young person in South Africa, whether you grew up in the township or in suburbia, you are privileged. you have to hear the African Bank story because it is one of sheer resilience. You know, it is one of what one would say very inspirational people that walked the path before us, that were brave, you know, to dare and dream. People that looked like I were not allowed to even hold a bank card or a bank book at the time. But 50 years in or later, you know, here we are, and we have Sbu, who's now the custodian of that particular brand. And welcome, Sbu. Then, of course, we've got the big U. Some they call it the University of Brands. I'm kidding. Unilever. I mean, those that that follow, you know, our other platform, the Patron Brands podcast. You know, where we chat with again captains of industry. Many of top marketers or marketing minds in South Africa have sort of cut their teeth at Unilever at some point. You know, and Unilever is home to many of South Africa's most iconic heritage brands that we love. So it's very important that you acknowledge our three storytellers, and of course, they will be navigated by Toni Gumede, whom also was very intentional because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, Toni, but I'm going to say it because you are also where you work on a full-time basis. You know, you are the custodian for this brand called South Africa, right? They're responsible for marketing South Africa as a destination, as an economy, and as a brand. And I thought, let me not be the one that moderates this conversation because now I'm going to start looking like Jomo Sono. You know, let me give this platform, because the ultimate goal is that this platform grows beyond me, you know, and I think we are at that point where we are now starting to think about legacy, right? And we all remember, you know, Molo Mhlobo wami. Can I say Molo Mhlobo wami? Yeah, I mean, iconic, unforgettable, you know. But now, where we find ourselves today, we have to ask the question, and I think they'll be able to answer this question. How do you strike the balance, you know, of maintaining tradition of a brand, but also embracing innovation and being innovative and building for the future? And I really hope that our storytellers will have the opportunity to unpack all of that. So with all that said, ladies and gentlemen, take out your phones as they say something that, you know, strikes a chord. Tweet it or X it, you know. Take out a phone, take a video, mention them on the Instagrams, at Patron Brands, at Telkom, _ZA. I hope I got that one right. But ladies and gents, tonight it's about just taking a step back and really reflecting on what it means. And I see a lot of other young entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs, if I have to say that, who are also building their own brands that hopefully one day, 50 years later, they'll also be one of South Africa's iconic, you know, heritage brands. Then you also have young professionals also in the space who are aspiring. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mukhosi. Mukhosi, why are you late? I'm kidding. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's welcome Toni Gumede, who will then kick off the panel discussion. Oh no, I'd like to play a video. Telkom recently rebranded. Let's just familiarize ourselves with this great brand.
Our legacy, our connections, our brand, turned on. Telkom.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on, Pat. You can come back. Well, good evening, everyone. Oh, guys, we're definitely not doing that. I promise you. We are not doing that. Let's try this again. I'm not going to run in like Pat. The shoes don't allow. But good evening, everyone. Thank you. That sounds much better. It's really amazing to be here. And Pat, you've really done an amazing job of creating platforms where we can come together. And I think tonight, our conversation being about the evolution of heritage brands really brings something that is not only close to my heart. I think when you work for a nation brand, it's not just a job, but you're working for your country's identity and heritage and culture that cannot live alone. You can't sell South Africa without those that make up who South Africa is. And those are the brands here. We had a little bit of a discussion with our storytellers before we walked in here this evening. And a part of that discussion was trying to bring in the dynamic of brands that are birthed in South Africa and brands that have so much South Africanness that they really are a part of who we are. So I'm going to introduce our storytellers to begin this conversation. And yes, there will be an opportunity for a couple of questions from the floor, but I think if I can sum up what I'm hoping we get out of this discussion, one, we will have new knowledge, fresh information. We will certainly be inspired. I was inspired, and we only were together just for perhaps 10 minutes maximum. But lastly, for those that are, Pat called us the older generation, captains, seasoned, yes, the more seasoned generation, we will definitely have a lot of nostalgia, I would say, I'm not even going to mention it because I don't want to get into the conversation just yet. Let me introduce our storytellers. The first person I'm going to ask is the Executive Marketing Director at Unilever. And ladies, I don't know about you, but I certainly have Vaseline. I thought it was in my handbag, but it's actually in my pocket, believe it or not. But I'm going to ask Elizabeth Mokwena to come and join me on the stage and take a seat. Anywhere you like. Yes, please. So we are going to take the time to appreciate people. These particular captains of industry and marketing are the people who often don't get the flowers. And so I'm going to take the time to share with you a little bit about her. I know she's cringing right now, but we're going to do it because you really never get the appreciation that you deserve when you're doing this job that you guys do. So we're going to do that. She's a multi-award-winning curator of local brand experiences, and she's a seasoned Pan-African brand builder with over 14 years of experience in MFCG industry. She has harnessed the art and science of marketing in order to deliver sustainable brand growth as well as shareholder value creation. And she has led more than $10 billion brands in Africa, including Sunlight, Pampers, Omo, Duracell, and Domestos. Yes, please do that. So she's certainly a very enthusiastic and purpose-driven marketer, and she believes in the power of creativity to change the world. Liz leads the home care division of Unilever Southern Africa, and this expands the footprint of this very iconic portfolio into and across the region. And in her words, if she has to summarize her work, she often says, giving global brands an African passport while giving African brands global exposure. No. Unfortunately for you, Liz, today I'm the boss for the next hour, not you. So she is an intersectional feminist, and this is very important because we know the importance of giving women voices to lead and to shape different spaces, especially brands, is something that is one long overdue and too important for the future of humanity. So she finds joy in exploring the boundiness of African creativity through fashion, literature, music, and food. And she's also an entrepreneur and currently busy with her post-grad studies in digital disruption. She has a passion to raise the next generation of African brand builders, and she has judged various awards, one of which she has been the president judge. I won't name all of them. It's definitely more than 3, I can tell you. I've got the list here in front of me. And so she also currently sits on advisory boards of different marketing associations, including the Marketing Association of South Africa, Association for Communication and Advertising, and Unstereotype Alliance SA chapter, as well as the Red and Yellow Creative School of Business. Ladies and gentlemen, Liz. I'm going to share with you our next storyteller, who I will ask also to join. It's still, we're not that far off from Women's Month, so you can just relax. And besides, birthday boy when this year. Gugu Mthembu, Mamvelase, please join us on the stage. Gugu is the Chief Marketing Officer at Telkom, and today she is also Mureki to you and I to be here. So Gugu has a career that spans over 2 decades in the ICT sector as well as in marketing. She's passionate about developing and growing iconic brands, case in point, and she's about facilitating diversity as well as inclusion. And she has a breadth of skills that are rooted not only in information technology, but in marketing. She has also, she transitioned into marketing and realized that's the space that she would add the most value, and she certainly has. She drives the brand and commercial strategy of the fastest growing telecommunications brands and has been the CMO for Telkom since 2020. Under her stewardship are the data science and CVM, product development and management, customer experience and segments, brands and marketing, communications, and digital marketing teams. She's certainly a respected voice, not only, yes, please do that. Why am I standing in front of you? The point is that everyone must watch you while I read this, and you start sweating in places. But it's really for the purpose of appreciating your input, not only in South Africa, because I know your voice goes beyond the borders of this country as well, Gugu. She's a respected voice within the global marketing and advertising communities, spanning as far as platforms beyond the country. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Gugu Mthembu. And only for the next hour you can call him birthday boy, because African Bank is 50 years this year. So Sbusiso Kumalo, please join me on the stage. He is not 50 years old, ladies and gentlemen. African Bank. Yes, African Bank is 50 years old, as we've heard. And so he is a visionary leader with over 2 decades of experience in the financial services industry. And he has notably played a vital role in his previous place of employ, Capitec, where the transformation into full retail bank during his tenure there took place, and he led the brand management of it as a brand manager to then the head of brand marketing. And in his current role as the managing executive at African Bank, he is dedicated to transforming and inclusive banking, which is aligned with his vision of people-owned and run financial sector. Very particularly important industry in terms of South Africa's offering as a nation brand, because banking is one of those sectors that we sell, and it is a reason to believe in the country's world-class level offering, because banking is one of the most sophisticated sectors that we have. So very respected leader in that space. And beyond his professional accomplishments, he is passionate about empowering young professionals and is committed to providing accessible banking services. His career highlights are still ahead of him, driven by his dedication to authenticity, truth, and a touch of love in all endeavors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Sbusiso Kumalo. So as I take my seat and take my phone leashed to me, off. I would like us to start with African Bank, only because it's your birthday, birth year, 50 years. African Bank has a story that I've heard it, and I'm sure others, captains of industry, you're called. I'm going to say you because I'm going to come out of this older generation story that Pat was trying to do. So that story is something that will always be hope-giving and inspiring. And I'm going to start by asking you to share that with us and everybody in the room, not only for inspiration, but to also get to the question, what does this 50-year milestone then mean? Not only for African Bank as a brand, but for African Bank's customers, as well as for South Africa.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Pat, for inviting me. Sorry I couldn't make the last engagement, so I hope I've made it up. And it's quite inspiring to see. It's quite inspiring to see your work. You're so passionate about brands. You put so much labor of love, I call it, into what you do. And I just want to say thank you for this platform. I think when I was starting out in my career and throughout my career, I would have appreciated platforms where I could also listen to captains of industry. And unless your company took you to a conference, sometimes you never get to hear a Jingila speak or so for you guys are privileged to have a platform like this that is available and accessible to you so thank you for that. It's so amazing. There's so many brands that really, when we think about them, they just bring back such memories. And, I particularly got to understand the African Bank story when I was still working in Stellenbosch. And I've always felt like, this brand was this underdog of a brand. And I got very intrigued by the story and tried to imagine. Now, I remember growing up as a kid, and my mom never used to refer to an ID as an ID book. She used to call it a dompas. So as a kid, I used to say dompas, but dompas was actually like a pass, udom, then uhamba ngepass. So this is the world that they lived in. A world where it was just so hard to just exist, to breathe, to just be yourself, right? And within that context, there's also people, business people, they're politicians, there are quite a lot of blacks that are just uncomfortable with what was going on. And what was going on was a status quo that they couldn't accept, was a script to a movie they never signed up for. And they refused to be actors in that movie. So actually, in the same month that Nelson Mandela and his co-accused were sentenced to life on Robben Island in 1964, a group of businessmen ascended on in Soweto, gathered in Soweto in what was the first conference of NAFCOC, which was a body that was a chamber of commerce for businesses, black businesses. And so these were kind of like two forces. One is a political force that's saying, we actually need to participate in the economy. We need to our rights, our land, everything that they were fighting for. And others that are saying, we've got businesses and our businesses need to grow and our businesses need to participate and we need to be able to also buy property, buy houses, expand global, go global and the works. And they gathered with that, with that passion and with that drive of how can we be able to fix some of the problems that we have just as business people, and of which there were many problems. And their one of the resolutions was around this issue that the banks at that time would not lend money to black people. So if you're black, you just cannot borrow from a bank. I mean, we laugh at it today, but I mean, that was the reality, you know. Not because you don't, you know, have what it takes, the credibility, but just because you're black. And for them, as business people, they found that it was quite limiting for them. And they couldn't grow their businesses, they couldn't fund their businesses. And at that age, Ndate Maponya and Motswenyane, they were not even 40 years old. You know, how many here are over 40? Sorry to do this. Very few. So the rest of you, except the two, they were your age when they went to a conference that they've organized. You know what I mean? How many of us have organized a conference, mobilized people to get somewhere and say there are these issues we need to discuss? Let's start an institution. Well done. Let's start an institution. Let's address these. Let's organize ourselves. Let's have governance structures to do this. This is what they did. And one of the resolutions was, if the banks are not going to borrow us money, let's start our own bank. Simple as that. If someone else is not going to do it for you, then do it for yourself. And it was then in 1964 that the idea of an African bank for Africans came about. Now, the rest is history, because it took them 10 years to just raise $1 million. It's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to get people to fund it. But what's inspiring was that in that conference, one of the members stood up and said, if we don't put our own money, then this would just remain an idea. And they collected the first seed capital there and then, and that's where the 70 rands came from. So what they collected at that conference was 70 rand, and that was almost the fuel for this vision and this dream and this purpose. And then they spent the next 10 years trying to make sure that the Minister of Finance approves them having a banking license. And they had conditions that were just crazy. You know, it was just so insane. What they had to do to qualify to open up a bank for blacks, including not being able to employ any white people, not being able to train in any white institutions. So it's almost like, okay, you can do this, but you're on your own. You're not going to get any help. You're not going to get any, you know. So it was just doomed to never take off. And when you have time, really just go and watch the videos on YouTube and just get to understand the story. We buried Ndate Motswenyane last year, and there's still videos of him that we have on our channels, and that speak of really the early days and what it took, and the women that they had behind them that really supported. So they used to have to, whenever they going on a rally to raise money, and one of the things they needed to do was to get all the tribal leaders to agree to this formation of a black bank. And that needed lobbying, that needed going to communities. So they used to, you know, their wives were really I think the bank is really, truly owed to them, because they're the ones that put in a lot of the work behind the scenes. So they're the heroes that we never really get to speak about enough behind African Bank.
A mouthful, thank you. But I'm tempted to take you, that's always an inspiring story, and I know we're inspired. But 50 years on, what does it mean now for the brand? What does all that history, all that resilience, what does it mean now for the brand and for the customers and for this country?
I think we live in a context where the game has changed and the opportunities are there, but we still have our people trapped. They're trapped, you know, sometimes economically with the system. Our economy is not growing, jobs cannot be produced fast enough, and young people are becoming frustrated. The saving grace for this economy is going to be entrepreneurship. But how many entrepreneurs can really walk into the bank, any bank, and say, I've got an idea, I need $1 million, and they walk out with it? It's zero. So today, African Bank is needed more than it was needed in 1964, more than it was needed in 1975. Why? Because it was intentional in terms of why it existed and for what reason it existed. And that's the story that we're trying to create today. That's what we're trying to build today. That's why we decided to diversify back into business banking. We launched the BTA account 2 months ago. We are busy building products and solutions so that if you're an entrepreneur, you can come to us and we back the jockey, because it's you who's going to make it work. If I don't believe in Pat, it's not about his financials, because he might not have property, he might not have a balance sheet, he might not have all these systems that the formal institutions use to be able to exclude him from having an opportunity and having a chance. And if you compare us to America, for example, in America, they will lend you money because you have failed. Here you fail, you're dead. They will never want to see you again. So what it means 50 years down the line is that we, myself, my colleagues, everybody that works in the bank has a responsibility to see that vision of the founders, to realize it, to turn the brand around, to make the bank solid, to be able to create a technology platform that young people are not going to be, if a banking app doesn't stack up, you can have a good story, it ain't going to mean nothing. You know what I mean? Aim on par with what 2025 is, and better. But if we do that, together with our heart being in the right place, imagine what that could do for this country. So our job right now is to make sure that we continue to make our technology platform stack up, get in line with what is required today. To make...
Well, I have to stop you, and out of thinking that you're going to start answering questions that I'm going to ask you a little bit later than this, let's move on to yourself. Look, everybody sitting here probably has half your portfolio of brands in their home, and one thing that is interesting for me, you've got iconic brands in your portfolio as Unilever. How is it possible that you can appeal to my grandmother, my mother, myself, and my 11-year-old? If there's really anything that can connect, 4 generations like some of your iconic brands do, and we've already mentioned Vaseline that has been having the whole country talking since that ad. Who hasn't seen it? Just put up your, we will try not to embarrass you if you haven't seen it.
Like, where are you living? All right. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I think good evening, Dumelang, everyone. Thank you for having me again, Pat. He's been asking, so I'm glad we could finally honor the invite. And you're right. It's such an honor to work for a company that has so many brands that have been in existence for so long, right? So we talked about Vaseline, that's been, alive for over 150 years, yeah? Sunlight is another one that's over 134 years. We're turning 135 years old next year. And when you actually sit and imagine that, like, nobody in this room is that old. And probably none of us are going to live to that age, yeah? So I think the let's call it the sheer weight of being able to keep these brands alive for other generations to experience them is an honor and is a responsibility that I feel blessed to oversee. So how do we do it? I'd say, firstly, being purposeful is one of those things. The founders of these brands were very clear on the vision that they had for them, right? So if I take the example of Sunlight, it was created in a time where it's in the 1800s. And if I give you context, guys, 1800s, women you couldn't even buy buy a house, you couldn't vote, you couldn't ride a bike, right? Disease was still a thing. Like flu could kill people, right? And at that time, the founder, one of the co-founders of Unilever, Lord Leverhulme, created a portfolio of soap brands. And Sunlight, Lux, and Lifebuoy were the first three. Lifebuoy's vision was very clear, yeah, to save people, yeah, from sickness and disease, which till this day it does. And Sunlight was very clear that it was supposed to ease the burden of cleaning, so that women can live their lives, yeah, and do more, because there was a recognition that there was more to life than just cleaning up in the house. And one, that was a clear vision that he'd put at that point. And we still, I think, stick to that very essence, right? In terms of making products that make cleaning easier, more enjoyable, superior product performance versus other brands, right? And being anchored in servicing these consumers. So this desire to really know what are the problems that people have in that time and then solving them, yeah? So there's an element of innovation, meaning you have to be curious about the problems that the people who are buying your products have and solve them better than any other product does in the market. But there's something about superiority in its design, yeah? And we're talking about that. If you think of a tub of Vaseline back in the day and a tub of Vaseline today, it's still doing the job and still doing the job better than other products, yeah? Or complementary products that have come into the market. So designing your product well, right, means that you don't have to touch it as much. Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel as much. But then move with the times, right? Right now, we've extended those product portfolios. So we didn't just start and stay in a bar soap or stay in a petroleum jelly or stay in whatever product was at the start. Sunlight right now has over 110 SKUs. Yeah, we're in over 11 categories, meaning we've expanded the servicing of women's needs. Vaseline is no longer just a petroleum jelly. Yeah? Right now, the big news on Vaseline is the CeraGlow product, which is an oil that is now used as a regimen, as part of lotion, you know, like what is called lotioning yourself up. So I think, to summarize it, I think brands that are superior in their design for whatever need they need to meet, that have an aesthetic that's desirable to the people that they want to, you know, appeal to, that are social in nature. I think the Vaseline example showed the social nature, that connect with humans, right? Like, that are also always looking out for young people. So I think in this day and age, if you are a brand that is operating on this continent where we have some of the youngest people, and I think by 2050 we'll have, 1 in 4 young people will be on this continent, you cannot ignore the importance of the youth in the sustainability of your brand moving forward. So what are those needs? And you talk to some of the problems that we have, but what are some of the solutions you can offer? That's what's going to take a Unilever, who's had brands that have been around for 150 years, to the next 150 years.
Before we step off you, Liz, for just this moment, can you just talk to the dynamic of a South African-born brand versus, because how many of you in this room knew that Unilever was not birthed in South Africa?
Yeah.
Okay, so less than half the room. The level at which you just feel so much, Unilever brands just feel so much part of our identity and who we are. I mean, when I saw the ad, I thought of my grandmother.
Yeah.
But in a nice way. It was like, oh, this is the one person who cared for me the most, because she was willing to beat you up if you didn't have Vaseline, you know?
No, I mean, for the what is called the half of the room that knew, I only found out that Unilever wasn't South African in existence probably, 6-7 years into the FMCG, because I worked in FMCG and I worked for Procter & Gamble. So when you're thinking about it as a competitor, you need to understand where they're from. But for my whole existence, yeah, these were the brands I grew up with. These, when you talked about proudly South African brands, these would be the brands that we reference. So I don't think that our brands are not South African, because I think what makes you South African, one, is in heritage. If you are ingrained into the cultures and into some of these acts that people do, like you were saying with Vaseline, the fact that every single generation would just like smear this thing on and make sure that, it was one of these traditions that we all look at with so much love right now, because we are passing on this dignity, we're passing on this hope that if your kid appeared bright and, glowing, that was a representation of dignity, regardless of where you came from, yeah? We are ingrained in how people shared meals with Knorr and Robertson and Raja, yeah? Cleaning up when you didn't have any money, yeah? And using this bar soap as multi-purposely. There's no other product that is in 9 out of 10 South African households. Sunlight Bar is. And what else would make you more South African than presence and penetration? It is one of the top 3 brands in FMCG. So for me, I always talk about this, giving global brands a South African passport or an African passport, because I think it's in being able to connect with rituals, connect with, culture and people who then subscribe to your product, accepting you into their homes. That's what's going to make you South African.
I certainly agree with that, because even if you look at the investment promotion space, which I'm very much active in, one, you benefit from brands that come from your stable easily in this way, in that they provide reasons to believe that a brand can come from anywhere, form part of the fiber of South Africa, grow with us, grow within us, and remain here. So basically, I'm saying your brands do a lot of investment promotion for this country,
but
brand.
100%.
Because they're a proof point.
But even if you think of just the societal structures, there are 3,000 people that we employ formally, 90% of our products actually are manufactured locally. So think of all the supply chains, the people in that, whether it's the people that are packing the shelves, the people that are farming the chilies, the people who are creating the oils that go into our products. We impact society in a truly South African way. And I think for me, that's what also makes you part of any community that you choose to associate with. Yes, there's a need that you're servicing as a corporate, but what are you giving back? Yeah? What are you doing for the betterment of that space that you're in? And I think Unilever, for many, we're sharing your story, with how your father was there, right? And what the impact has been generationally for your family. So having brands that you work on that have had generational impact, for me, makes me proud to say, yes, it started globally, but certainly it has everything that's South African in terms of its blood and authenticity. I think this is one of the only countries globally that Sunlight still exists as a powerhouse that it does. It's fizzled out everywhere else in the world. Nowhere else do we have the first original bar that the founder made. And that speaks to, I think, the way that the South African marketeers over the generations have respected and understood what this bar meant to this country. And that is what's important to me, is to make sure that legacy continues. And I'm a custodian, but it's not for me to change the story. It's for me to pass on the story as better as I can.
Absolutely amazing. Love that. I would like us to move on. I would like us to move on to Usis Gugu here, Mam Velase. And we have also grown. I very much suspect Telkom is probably the oldest brand here. That is no indication of who is the oldest here. But Telkom is really the oldest brand here of us. And you have, the Telkom brand is a heritage brand that prides itself of having been the original connector. Pat referenced Molo Mhlobo Wami, and this will reveal your age. Who remembers ATA? Okay, Pat, these people are not as young as you said they might be. To Telkom Mobile. Now, we have observed that you have gone through a rebranding, and as marketers, we know it's not just a logo change or how bold and bright the color palette is now, but I would like for you to share with us the vision behind that rebranding and how it reflects on your evolution as a brand.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible. You're quite right in that we are the oldest brand in the room, and I think this is no indication of of assuming which other brands may be represented here. Telkom's history spans back almost 2 centuries, where we started the first post office in the country. And some of you who may not know, those born in the recent generation, we were, up to 1991, the Postal and Telecom Services of South Africa. So I think when you think about that, everything that talks to connections, we've enabled. The post office, as you may know, was the first telephony system that existed. When people needed to communicate, whether it was via a telegram, writing a letter, that would take months sometimes to cross oceans. We were given the responsibility, mandated to do that for South Africa. So we've been and are very much part of the fabric of South Africa. And yes, we have evolved over time, and we may not be known for that because I think in part of our evolution, what we've tried to maintain is a mindset of being a challenger. And I think it's quite difficult to be a challenger in a heritage brand at the same time, because I think when you think about it, challenger brands are ones that come in to destabilize the status quo, right? And who sets the status quo? The heritage brands that may have already existed. But I think the topic today is quite relevant to who we are, and that's why when Pat called, we looked at it as like, actually, this talks to the journey that we are on, and the journey that we've been on over the years, evolving from, like I say, the post office and postal services, to the Telkom that most of you know from 1991, the Molo Mhlobo Wami version, where we were connecting people across valleys with the landline, to some of you who may be as old as I am, who remember the ticket boxes at university where we had to stand with the card. And someone recently reminded me that some of you, because I wasn't part of that gang, would slot the card in and tap that thing, the receiver, so that you could make calls for free to what we know today as fiber, mobile telephony, satellite provider. So evolution has really been part of who we are. And one of the keys that we keep in our brand is one of transformation. And so when we talk about the vision behind the rebrand that we have today, it's with that mindset that in every shape or form that Telkom has existed, our roots were always on enabling human progress and enabling transformation through connectivity and through connections. And as part of that, then you then see, even with the slogans that we've put out there in the past, whether it was tomorrow or touch tomorrow, because when you think about it, touching tomorrow talks about your evolution towards the next phase, right? Tomorrow starts today, where we were telling people that actually the possibility of tomorrow exists even at that point in time. To Molo Mhlobo Wami, which was bridging the gap across the valleys. Living your monati, which was talking about living your passions, right? And today, when we talk about possible begins here, through all of those, there's that common thread about transformation. So if we are then the champions of transformation, we cannot stay the same, right? We have to transform ourselves first and transform internally before we can transform the people. But what was most important with this brand refresh, and it's not cosmetic, it's quite strategic. And it's a journey that we've been on since the time I joined Telkom, because I think the responsibility of steering a brand as massive and as big as Telkom is one that I don't take for granted, because I know its role and the role it plays in South Africa and connecting South Africa to the world. And I think some of you just know certain bits about Telkom, but we are the biggest operator that lands undersea cables, which are the cables that connect the internet to the globe. So through our open serve division. So the Equinox cables that sometimes you may hear about, cables breaking in Kenya, and there's no internet connectivity for a week, for a day. I think the one time Twitter was down because there was a broken link under the sea, right? So all of those things talked to, we are literally woven into the fabric of this country. So that understanding and understanding that we have to keep this brand alive is what led to this transformation, where firstly was looking at what are the keys that are important to keep? Because I think the key about heritage is that there are things that have worked for you, that have built your equity, and you can't therefore let go of those when you are transforming, right, or when you are evolving. So making sure that you are clear on what those keys are. And then secondly, what are the things that are going to make you relevant across generations? And I think if you've lived for almost 200 years like us, some people know us when we connected them, like I say, via the ticket box, and we were quite relevant for them at the time, but that's no longer relevant for the youth of today who live in a digital first world. And therefore, we had to look at our own expression, and if that expression actually is talking to evolution. So one, there's an element of remaining true to who we are, which is our heritage, led by our purpose. And our purpose, like I said, is about enabling human progress through connectivity. And human progress is not just humans at an individual level, but also talking to families, talking to businesses, and talking to the nation itself. And with that, pairing it with an evolution and making sure that we are being relevant across generations. But our brand was quite staid and rigid. I think some of you may agree with that. The boxed blue Telkom did not talk about a digital brand, and especially when we operate in a technology space. It didn't allow us to do the things we wanted to do in a fluid manner, because I think expression is about fluidity, right? It's fluid, it evolves over time, but heritage is rooted. And therefore, in all of that, had to look at how then do we divorce from some of the things in our heritage that were no longer serving us, one of them being the perceptions of being a state utility brand and utility provider to being a digital enabler, right? So that was important, but it's not just, like I say, cosmetic. We had to then go and fix things internally as well in terms of the plumbing. Part of the plumbing is making sure that we were rebuilding trust with our consumers. We were doing away with some of the perceptions around poor service and all of those things before we could get to a point where we could then say, here's a new look and a new look and feel. And I think when you start engaging with our new identity, you will see then the dynamism that is in it. And because dynamism talks to transformation, it means that you are evolving, right? You'll see the dynamism that will come with it, but you'll also see some of those keys and core essence of who Telkom is in terms of just being a transformer, just being an enabler, the connector, and I'm hoping that when you do get to see more of the work that's going to be coming out in terms of then reshaping the brand itself, that you will resonate with it, because I think resonance is quite important across the generations that we've served and we're going to continue to serve.
I think that deserves a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to find out, and you've touched on it a little bit, how has innovation then played a part in keeping not only your brand forward-looking, but that ability to retain that much heritage? I mean, heritage, as you said, it's not that fluid. It's not moving through the time, but it's that memory of who you are, that identity. How have you balanced the two, and the innovations that have made you to still remain current without losing that legacy part?
Sure. I think what's key and important is to understand that heritage brands are kind of the bridge between the past and the future, because they've been there in the past, but also I think because, or rather, them being able to stand the test of time and being able to transcend generations also required them to innovate at some point, right? And innovation in the context of you have to understand the changing consumer needs. You have to understand the changes in culture as well, because I think heritage brands are deeply rooted in culture. And if you are deeply rooted in culture, you can't therefore embrace a certain phase of cultural change and not the next, right? So you have to keep evolving with culture. And I think that lens of always constantly looking ahead is how we create the bridge between the two. And we see the two working together, actually. The heritage is the equity that you've built, right? It's a legacy that keeps you grounded and rooted, whereas innovation is what keeps you relevant. And the two together is the resilience then that propels you forward. So I think it's quite important that you look at the two in tandem and not playing against each other.
Yes, please, you're more than welcome.
No, I love that point around wasn't on. Sorry, I was saying this point of sustainability and continuity, and that's important, right, for any brand's existence. And for me, innovation is really the bridge on that. It doesn't erase the heritage; it extends it. Yeah. In terms of a meaningful offering for the people of that time. And so it's important as a brand to innovate. Yeah, if you're not moving, if you're not changing, if you're not trying something or taking a risk, you're dead. The biggest risk in business, the biggest risk in any organization is not being able to take the risk to allow yourself the opportunity to still exist into the future. Right? And we've seen that happen to so many brands and so many organizations over time because they stayed stagnant because of that, what it's called, dominant position that they had in that moment, not recognizing that times continue to move. So that is a key asset. But then you look at the things that make your brand stay the test of time. So I like the element of, so let me use Omo as an example. For as long as I've known it, it's always been about stain removal. Almost still about stain removal today. But in my mom's time, right, what that stain removal was about in terms of what it enabled you, or even my grand's, it was a pride element, right? Like the white shirt was my opportunity to get a job, or the white uniform as a nurse was a dignity moment, right? The white socks for my kid was a representation of how good a mother I was. Then formats moved because, you know, I've got a washing machine. So I don't want washing powder because it stays. Yeah, it clogs up my washing machine. How do you make a product that moves, still delivers stain removal, but in a different way? So then you make a liquid, right? And then you realize, actually, there are people who are saying, okay, what about the environment? Because you guys use so much water. You guys are actually, you know, impacting the environment. What do you do then? So you look at your packaging and you make it recyclable. You look at the enzymes that you're using and make them more natural and biodegradable, right? And now I think we're in this next lever where convenience is becoming a thing. So how do we innovate in line with that? Whether that's the introduction of the capsule or the pod or products that can clean within 15 minutes, yeah? What can we do auto-dosing? So the benefit is still there, but it is moving with the times.
I like that. Moving with the times. And it's very nice how you've given examples, especially in your heritage brands. Yeah. But it would be very interesting, Sbu, to hear from you how African Bank has evolved through to service this changing society. You know, it's much easier for us to get, as Liz has articulated, but I don't think we've had the privilege to hear how African Bank has done that evolution through the changing needs in the society.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll maybe answer it in two parts. One is almost innovation from a product point of view, and the other, it's also innovation from a marketing point of view, because the way I was just explaining earlier about how Unilever used to have this surf picker box show that as a young kid I used to watch and I used to love, and it's still kind of like, I can still feel, the energy of that competition. Will it work today? I don't know. But the things that we did 5 years ago are not the things that are going to make us win in this market, because there's more things that are seeking attention from consumers, and there are more players that are, fighting for that attention, less money to, 20 years ago, 8 o'clock, you watch Generation, you put your ad, everybody's going to see it, Now you put your ad, nobody's going to see it. So the world has changed. So I'll give you two answers, one from a business and one from a marketer, because maybe there are marketers in the. So I always say that the Stone Age didn't die because we ran out of stones. We still have a lot of stones out there, but we progressed as a society, and we needed more better ways to live and, do things. So the people in the organization are the most important ingredients to innovation, because they constantly need to be pushing that boundary. People don't generally know what they want. I can't go and tell Unilever what I want, but once they bring it, I'll be like, that's exactly what I wanted. You know what I mean? So it's the people. You have to create an environment where you allow people to just do stuff and just think stuff, and just the more it's different, the more it sounds weird, just give it a chance, because that's where, just something that is just a stroke of genius comes from. We recently launched a product called Isiko, and it's not a product actually, it's a solution. Because we're like, okay, let's just try and understand it. We are a black bank wanting to serve blacks and their challenges and their opportunities and everything. So one of the things that we go through that we just wish there was a platform that enables this thing to happen, effectively. You're gonna need to pay lobola, your child might have to have umgidi, umembes, or whatever it is. How can we create a solution that enables you to save for it, but if you've got a shortfall, you can borrow to top it up, but also if you just need knowledge of what to do, because we are now the grown-ups. There's no, you know what I mean? So, I remember, I've got an uncle who prides himself as the best slaughterer of sheep, and he really does it with such passion. He's got his own little knives that he moves around with, and he's the guy. But I dread the day he dies, because I ain't gonna be doing that. I wanna go to Pick n Pay and say, so that's not really cascading down to me. We really need to, in an ever-changing world, we really need to think sometimes of just what is the simple thing, and then let the engineers work out how to make it happen. So you go to them with the problem, they must figure it out. But once it lands, then people really say, oh, this is what I needed. You know what I mean? So that's old saying that Henry Ford said, if you asked what people want, they would say a faster horse. No one is ever going to say a car. Then in terms of marketing, now, you advertise, social media, digital and everything. You do your sponsorship, your activation. But sometimes you might just strike something that would resonate with people, like fashion. We did fashionable banking campaign, which was really never intended to be a big campaign. It was really just creating uniform that was cool for our staff to feel a sense of pride in the brand. But it turned into a campaign that has really inspired other brands to also start doing the same for their people. So you also need to constantly think about new ways to be able to cut through the clutter, to be able to stand out, but not losing authenticity and resonance. Because so innovation is not just in the solutions of the products, it also even in the way you're gonna reach to people and be, connected to them, and for them to get to know you and to give you an opportunity to actually stop and say, okay, I'm interested, this is quite cool, because there's just so much stuff that needs attention from us every single day. Thank you.
So, I would first, before we move on, I just want to check if we're good on time, because not only am I born of 2 teachers, but I have storytellers here. We could do this for a very long time. I would like to hear some questions. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to, yes, you're already standing up. You are 1. And to your right, 2 people to your right, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right here. Okay. In that order, guys.
Is that better? Cool, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It's really incredible to hear your stories. And it's really awesome that I've had an experience on all 4 of your brands. But I guess for me, Liz, this is initially directed to you, and there may be some responses from the panel. We recognize we're in a time of hardship. We've touched on it. It's a volatile time for consumers. We recognize that the repurchase cycle for FMCG and washing products is extended from 6 to 9 weeks. 41% are stretching usage of their products, and some people are even skipping washing, 31%. So when we think about that, sorry, I just wrote this down so I could remember it. How do brands fight for relevance, justify connection, and defend spending on the so-called soft attributes of times of consumer hardship when promos are shifting basket in real time? So when you think of it, right now, we have everybody saying, cut the media spend, cut the brand budgets, and let's think about what's happening on shelf. It all matters on shelf.
Yeah.
And then it's the quickest race to the bottom. But we know there's been some tremendous stories in history, such as Tesco in the last recession, that came out guns swinging when every other supermarket declined. So this is aimed at you, but we do know brands have often sometimes ignored these habits, like Coca-Cola with Twizzler in the Eastern Cape, or Kingsley across the country. So how do we, just to repeat the question, how do we do it?
Yeah. Okay.
So just perhaps to be efficient, let's try and do it like this. Let's take 3 questions at a time and give... Pat, are you agreeing with me? You're not giving me an agreeing face.
Yeah, I might forget this one because it was...
That's why I'm pulling out my phone.
Okay, should I try and do this while it's...
Okay.
And then we'll take the next
So
one.
Liz will will do this one. She won't
Justice,
try,
yeah.
no, she'll do it justice. Then we'll just take 2 more. Let's just try to be as concise as possible.
Okay. So I think 100% on the facts. It is very tough times for FMCG as an industry, particularly in this continent that we live in, where 80% of the population is living on $2 a day or less. Now, for a company, there are 2 things, right? Which is the volume and the value. And sometimes, and the benefit of being a Unilever is you've got a portfolio of products that you can then look and leverage, for moments such as this. 1, tough times don't mean that you don't innovate, You might innovate in the way that you communicate value. So Sunlight Bar, as an example, is a perfect product in these times, because I'm sure people have seen on Twitter, it goes every single year, it'll be trending without fail, somebody talking about how you can use this bar multi-purposely, whether it's for your washing, people are doing edges now with it, people are using it in their bodies for things I won't mention today, but people can really use it for dishes, for laundry, for skincare, for, babies. It really is a brand that grows in tough times, And therefore, for me, packaging, reminding consumers of the superior quality of this product, and continuing to invest in new ways of connecting with the youth is what I would do in this time. So as an example, we did the Raise a Bar campaign. So you talked about music being one of these elements, of society. Being able to tap into youth culture, using hip hop and music as a way of connecting with young people, and allowing them to tell their story of how they use sunlight in this era was one way of doing that. I didn't have to create a big TV advert, but I went social. Yeah, because I could talk and have many conversations and have many views on that brand and allow it to do what it naturally did. The other way is then we talk value, right? So how do you innovate at the top end of your market? And we've done that on brands like Comfort, yeah, which recently launched, yeah, fine fragrance variants, which have completely disrupted how people have seen that category. And in this time, that's a, you know, when you talk of tough times, that's a luxury buy, right? You can go without a fabric enhancer or fabric softener. But we created it or designed it in a way that it was so desirable. And I think that's the key sometimes, is how do you unlock desire, particularly in FMCG, at scale? One way to do that is to create products that people really love. Once they've used it once, they're coming back. Yeah, like you've just turned them. Secondly, is how do you use social and digital? So how do we use other people to tell the story of this thing, right? And you would have seen it show up in digital in a way you wouldn't have experienced from a home care brand, because we're very clear that we wanted this to show up as a person, like the personal care of home care. That was the brief that I'd given to the creative agencies, right? And then it allowed category value. So it was easy to sell into the customers, because when people are buying it, they're trading up. It was like the lipstick effect of home care. So you need to really also be creative in how you are doing things. It doesn't mean cut spend. In fact, we over-invested in Comfort in this time. That is super tough as a market. And you would have seen it across the portfolio. So we've just launched Domestos Power Foam, which is disrupting toilet care. Yeah, by also working upside down, absolutely. We've just launched the new Sunlight dishwash liquid, which is superior, yeah, premium variants that have patented DRAM-no technology. So there's investments that we made that are expensive, but that is us protecting our business for the future, because we realize we can't just sit around and just promo everything. Yeah, we'll promo ourselves into death. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can I go?
Sorry, before we step off that, can we have Gugu?
Yeah. No, absolutely agree with what Liz has just said, especially the point around social advocacy, because I think when you as a brand listen and listen attentively to your consumers, you get to know what they say about you that you may not be paying attention to. And I think some of what fueled our growth, I think post-ATA, when we were still called Telkom Mobile, was the youth. And I think it speaks to that point during the data must fall movement, and youth were seeking more affordable connectivity, right? And then they started realizing that they were getting more value from Telkom, not value in terms of the bundles were cheaper, but the bundles lasted longer. When our competitors were giving 30-day validity, we were giving 60-day validity. When our competitors had bundles that only worked certain number of hours in a day, we were giving additional data with Night Safer, right? We literally started the Night Safer concept, which has now become an industry norm. When we realized in conversation with the likes of YouTube that South Africa was the fastest growing YouTube consumption country, I think around 2017, we responded by including YouTube for free in our FreeMe products. So I think as brands, it's about being attentive to what your users are saying, and then tuning into that and using that as leverage, right, to build from. But social advocacy is definitely something that sometimes brands overlook, and we go onto social media more for the hype and forget that it actually is a powerful tool to give us insights.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I work within the Township space, and I'm very passionate about it, and I'm often very saddened when the brand and about the brand and the perception around our Kasi economy. And this question is directed to you, Gugu. And I've written it down so that I can be concise. So I'm not sure if most of us know, but the township economy is actually worth 900 billion. So the township, and it's often seen through the lens of risk and informality, yet it represents a massive untapped consumer and innovation market. From your perspective, how can we rebrand and reposition the township economy to shift investors' perspective, so that it can be viewed not just as a social development space, but as a serious investment opportunity with scalable returns?
We're going to take...
Can I just add on what she just said? So just to avoid asking the same question twice. So me, I'm going to obviously say the same thing, but around outdoor advertising. So most briefs, especially from these heritage brands, the briefs comes out saying Gauteng, KZN, Western Cape, and there are heritage brands. What's happening? Why are you not communicating enough with Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Eastern Cape, Northwest, and those provinces? Thank you.
Perhaps let's take one more and not three, because there's been...
Okay, let's change sides.
No,
let's change sides.
I already gave an order of who... Yes.
Live and
Hi guys, I'm Garrett. I'm going to tackle the heritage thing from a different point of view. So I'm a product of the diaspora, Jamaican born, grew up in the US, now attracted to South Africa for the last 10 years. And so in the formulation of plans, talking about heritage, there's a desire with the diaspora to really connect, plug into places where they connect with or feel like they're tracing back to. We know the power of the diaspora as far as the spend, and then also the desire to be a part of Africa's success story going forward. What thought process, is there around the marketing, that also extends in that way, where you can take a love for the brand here and then, other places. Unilever is in the US as well. That ad, when I thought about it, I was thinking about, all right, now if they had that juxtaposed with, in the US context, it could have kind of reverberated a little bit, so what plans are, made, or is there a thought process around how do you make this thing a little bit bigger to connect, different parts of the diaspora?
So can we pause on the questions before? I'm going to just overlay that with a question that was planned, but I felt that we must give time for questions to the audience, but I think it connects with the diaspora question. And this is for any of the storytellers here. What does collaboration look like between heritage brands and emerging brands who aspire to be heritage brands one day? And I'm inclined to look at you, Sbu, for that one. It's probably for the reason of your story of going into fashion. But additional to that, collaboration, I know in the space that I work in, we love to collaborate with brands that have footprint where we have interests in that market, because of course the state doesn't have half the money that these brands have, but it just makes sense because you create advocacy for the brands, for the country, by those, say, South Africans living in that market. So I just want to overlay that before we go back to taking the question of the township economy to the targeting in certain provinces and not others, based on the briefs the gentleman asked over there, as well as the last question. So I'm very sure each one of the storytellers will have a bite.
Sure. I think if any brand, I just want to make sure I took the question down correctly. If any brand sees the township economy as risky, I think they're already dead. They're already history. And their heritage will just be in museums and will not live beyond this generation. And I say that because I think we realize the amount of innovation that comes from that economy particularly. And I think when you live in a country like South Africa, where most of our people are, ignoring that market is to your own peril. And I think I'll make an example about Telkom because we do invest significantly in the township economy through our Future Makers program, which is our ESD program. And what we do particularly is to go and find entrepreneurs, technology entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs that are leveraging the power of technology in different fields. And I'll give a few examples of brands that you may know or may have come across that we've enabled over time. And I think it probably addresses, will lean into the question around brands then being in the major metros and not expanding beyond that. In the investments that we make with future makers, we do different types of things, whether it's hackathons or the likes, but we also source tech entrepreneurs in the townships and then provide solutions to them in the form of financing, in the form of mentorship, in the form of incubation. And one such brand where we went even beyond just the incubation and actually ranged the brand in our stores is the Koi brand, which is a brand of smart wearables, so smart watches. I think some of you may have come across it, and I think I made reference to it a few years back when I were on a panel in the south of France. And it's a brand that we take pride in seeing it grow over the years, because how many of us know about alternatives to an Apple Watch or a Huawei watch that I'm wearing, and one that is the brainchild of someone who's local, because they realize that the same health benefits that we are seeking, those of us who are privileged to be able to afford these type of watches, everyone else needs such, right? And then they develop similar products, but more affordable and more accessible for our people. So I think definitely heritage brands need to lean into what drives this economy. And I think the stats that you are mentioning in terms of the contribution to the overall broader South African economy are stats that cannot be overlooked. And there's a number of other examples I can make. I think Beauty on Tap was also one of our beneficiaries. They don't play in technology space, but when they first broke into the market, they only had the digital platforms to distribute their products. So they started off as an app where they were sourcing different types of beauty products, and then people could buy from that. And today, I think I saw last week that she's opening another store in Sentin. She opened a store in Fourways just a few weeks or a few months ago. So I'm just making examples based on what we believe and invest in, and I'm hoping that it encourages other heritage brands to do the same. And your point around then how we then market and find markets as brands. And I know because at some stage we were there as Telkom, where most of our distribution was centered around the major metros and therefore advertising as well. And the journey we've taken over the last 6 years, I think some of you who pay attention may have seen that we've probably tripled our footprint. And the areas where we've tripled our footprint is actually in the provinces outside of the top 3. And so if you move around the country now, you see a bit more of Telkom presence, and it was quite intentional. You see a lot of these blue painted spaza shops. You see a lot of these wall murals that are Telkom branded. And you see a lot of these more large scale media formats. Like I think recently, whenever you go into Mpumalanga, you go into that bus rank where everyone congregates to get to Johannesburg, to get to Durban, or to get to Limpopo, you see a lot of Telkom. So I think as a brand, one, we understand that we are rooted in South Africa, and South Africa doesn't live in just Gauteng, KZN, and Western Cape, but it lives across all 9 provinces. And therefore, it's imperative for us to be visible in those, because our visibility also motivates the people to actually connect through us. So I think it's quite essential that we start as brands to look beyond where the money concentrates, but to also move into where there's volume. May not give us the riches that everyone seeks out of Gauteng, but I promise you, when as a brand you go to where the people are, the people invest back in you.
You might be 50 after all. So, collaboration. What does opportunity look like when it comes to collaboration between heritage brands that are way more established, like African Bank, and an emerging brand. And I do think you have really a beautiful example. I mean, without knowing it, you had me selling your uniform somewhere in China to some dignitary because I didn't have a gift to give them. So I told the whole story of Kosi and your collaboration and the work that you had done there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Before I answer that, I just want to touch on the township economy. And we've been having quite a trying time with the Soweto Marathon that we sponsor of late. And at the launch, I was just, drawing parallels between Boston City Marathon and the $500 million US it creates for the economy of Boston, and just saying what could we do with the Soweto Marathon if we just work together to make it happen rather than not to make it happen. Because what activity does for the townships, when you bring money from outside the township into the township, it's amazing. If the money that is generated in the township could circulate 3 more times, it has 5 times the value. Sometimes it leaves the very afternoon that it arrives. It comes back to Sandton. If we could have a township stock exchange, what does that do for businesses? So we need to understand the rules of the game. And then we need to say, how can we play the game according to the rules of the game? Otherwise, that corner shop just remains a corner shop. And it doesn't grow. It doesn't get invested. I want to buy shares in whatever business that's in the township. There is no platform to do that. So we need to really open up our minds and say, what can we learn from those that are doing it at that level? How can we bring it to our level, but use the same game plan to be able to give these businesses real rocket power with our money, by ourselves. We don't need anybody else. What we just need to do is to study and come and implement. So that's awesome. In terms of collaboration, it is beautiful when young businesses collaborate with, heritage brands or any big brands, because you just bring this breath of fresh air, this spark of energy, and it's something that I've always advocated. I've worked with many individuals. I'm not big on, dropping names and all that kind of stuff, but I've always been inspired by the opportunity and the possibility of taking someone and say, hey, why don't we try do this? Let's see how this could pan out. And they just give you that boost and hoping that they learn the principles of what makes a heritage brand heritage so that they can also live a legacy. And there's one message that I could give to anyone that's young and that's got a business. People don't buy what you do. And they certainly don't buy how you do it. The main reason why people buy you is why you do it. And most brands that exist, it's because of the why. And the ones where the why gets lost, you have a Murray and Roberts. There are many brands that are big, that dominate industry, but they also close. Because somewhere, somehow, leadership loses the why. And that's the one thing that people come to your brand for. Why?
Sure. Over to you, Liz.
Right.
I know you still remember.
All right. So I think I'll touch a little bit on a couple of things. So one is investing in other spaces. except let's call it the metropoles. I'm going to premise this by saying business exists, in order to create value for the shareholder. So as a custodian of a business, you have a responsibility as well financially to put the very money that shareholders have given to you in spaces that you think are going to create return. And therefore, there is a dual responsibility, One, on the people who are custodians of that money to identify spaces that will be future growth engines, So investing ahead of the curve. Don't wait to jump on a bandwagon, start a bandwagon, But also, there's a responsibility for people who are in those spaces to be able to sell the value proposition of that investment. So if you have outdoor space in Mpumalanga or in, Limpopo, how are you selling that space? Because particularly in companies like ours, right? So we'll have big buying groups, that buy inventory on our behalf. That's your primary actual customer. So how do you stand out when these buying groups are approaching you? Even better, how do you stand out such that Liz is like, I want that space, and I'm influencing my buying group to say, I want to be there, right? How do you tell the story of your business in a way that is differentiated and meaningful, And to your point, the why of why you exist, so that we want to make that investment. So there is a bit of a partnership in this regard. It's not just, like we're saying, it's not a non-profit organization. Corporate is a for-profit organization, and you have a responsibility to create value for the shareholder, because that's ultimately the people who've trusted us with their money. So if it was your mom's pension, that she'd worked for 6 years, would you want somebody like me just blowing it? Or would you want me to make really financially solid choices to make sure that she can still live out her pension with some level of return? And I think both kind of things weigh on us as custodians of brands and custodians of businesses. So that's the first thing. But that's not to say we're not making the investment. So as an example, in home care, which was one of the categories that I'm responsible for, we are very clear that spaces like Limpopo, spaces like Mpumalanga, spaces like the Northwest are key engines of growth for us. And we are looking for partners that can make sure that we are showing up and are not only physically available through distributor networks, but mentally available to consumers in relevant ways, whether that's in outdoor, whether that's in local radio or ALS radio. We are trying to experiment in different ways of how to grow. But it's a change in industry as well, because I need the creatives who write and connect with consumers in those spaces in a meaningful manner. The, Umtanaga Koko resonated because it was in our language. So it's a whole ecosystem of transition, of diversity, of giving people voices in spaces where the decisions are being made. That's a long answer, but I hope it helps with that. Then the space of how do you then, if you're thinking of the diaspora and people who are wanting to make investments into the region, how do you do that and how do you balance that? I'd say because I've always worked on mostly global brands that have wanted to grow in the continent, I'd say what's important is to always start with being passionate, deeply passionate about solving problems, for your audience. Whether you're selling a product or your service, you have to be passionate about service. And if you're not, it's going to tell over time, right? Because when the going is good, it's great to do the service. It's when the going is hard, that you have to have that resilience. And so I think being deeply passionate about people, because we have a lot of people on this continent, and being passionate about solving their problems, because we have a lot of problems as well, right? Societal, infrastructure, economical, whatever it is. There are lots of problems, which I see as opportunities for innovation and creating solutions. So start with that humility, that we are in service of others. Right? Whether I'm in service of the business or in service of the consumer or in service of others. So start with that. Then it's, what are those insights? For me, insights are the most attractive thing because once you really, really get a great insight, it will resonate beyond the geography that it came from, right? The Share a Coke campaign was from Australia, and it was just a couple of people, I think, playing around in a factory with personalization. It has now become a global movement that, Coke has taken. Right? And how do you get to those things that anybody around the world feels like it was made for them, right? Because that's really where the power is, where you have something so true in terms of human existence that everybody feels like they can relate to it, whether they're in that, from that country or not. I'll use the Vaseline example again. In fact, Vaseline is growing because of both things. There's a global element to it, and I think we're talking about that innovation. The new CeraGlow oil and the CeraGlow range was really big in the States, right? Through big social influencers who are making it credible. But because we live in a global world, people were seeing that. And for a long time, South Africans were asking us, like, when are you guys bringing the gel? Like, you know, give the girlies what they want. So there is a global influence that is there, whether it's in music, yeah? We are living in a global community, and this thing gives us access to the world. Then there's the local residents. And how do you start balancing those things out? And when you have a beautiful brand like the one I've just spoken about, you're able to do both of those things without either feeling isolated or not part of your story. The story is collective, meaning it will have many faces to different people. Yeah, to the Gogo, it is that pride that she was, you know, kind of putting on her kid. To the, you know, girl, the it girl now and who wants to have a glow, we're there for you too, you know? If you've got the ashy lips and you're looking to go kiss your girl, we're in, look, CeraGlow girlies, yes. You know, but how do you create a story where everybody feels involved? And if you do that, yeah, focus on the people, focus on solving their problems, and create something that is a universal insight, then I think you will be having a winning equation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're going to take, yes, the gentleman is standing.
Thank you very much. Now I've been following the Telkom brand very closely. Disclaimer, my wife used to head up Future Makers, Matebe, right? So, so currently I did something weird. I'm a mathematician, data scientist, but I decided to go into branding. So I'm doing a PhD in brand leadership. So, thank you. So, as I was scouring around looking for a topic, Telkom landed on my desk, and I found something about Telkom that I think is underexploited because you have this value that you've been offering for almost 100 years, which is in the skills development and entrepreneur development side of things. It's so time invariant because if you look at the number of technicians that Telkom created, if you look at even the switch where you empowered OpenServe entrepreneurs who are all over. So you find there's so many Telkom entrepreneurs, just like Buffett entrepreneurs, but that story we haven't had it yet. And you find there are businesses like Sweep South that were given seed money by Telkom. There are so many of us that were given money by Telkom along the way. And no, as in entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs, right? So, no. I'm an entrepreneur before anything, right? So you find that it's. I did an anecdotal look into the NPS, like from tech founders. So Telkom scored the highest because your programs are actually more impactful. And I believe that when it comes to the model that you have come up with, it's something that can be shared with other corporates. And then lastly, with Sbu, I mean, I'm based at 22 Sloan, so I see your work as well, Sbu, that you're doing with the township economy and in the entrepreneurship space. It's really great, and I believe that a partnership between you and Telkom would actually add far much more value to the entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Love it, love it.
But come to this booth.
There's a, yes. No, the next question
was at the top there.
At the top there.
So, I'm actually going to build on his point and tell a story that I think illustrates the impact of Telkom, where we look at ShopRite, where they've managed to build $1 billion brand in 60/60 over 6 years. And a big part of that has come from the fact that they brought in Zulzi as a startup and leveraged their platform to get to where they're going, right? And Zulzi is the product of I'm In, which is funded by Telkom Future Makers. And in that regard, I'd like to ask a question that I'll bookend, leveraging what Sbusiso said around a common belief that we share, that I believe startups are going to save the world. They can solve a lot of the problems that we've got in society. But the challenge that we've got, especially as black people, we love if we could do this, if we could do that, if we had a stock exchange, if we had this, that, and the other. What can we do within the corporate space on top of the programs that are being set up to invest? But I'm speaking now from the perspective of someone who exists as a corporate citizen in their personal capacity. And I'm asking you guys as captains of industry, leaders within your organizations, what can individuals do within the corporate space to facilitate entrepreneurship, to facilitate external innovation being brought in-house and used to drive that accelerated innovation that you were talking about?
Can I?
Okay, you start.
Okay, sorry for it. Can I start? So I think you absolutely touch on a point on the fact that we have the solutions, right? And it's creating, the cases that the world wants to go learn from, and protecting that IP, and costing and gaining value, for everybody who was included in that creative process, let me call it, right? So M-Pesa is a world-class example from Kenya, on mobile money. And there wasn't nobody had to sign it off, to say, we see you, right? Like we weren't looking for validation from the States, who were still busy with Silicon Valley, or Europe, right? They did it for themselves because they had a problem of getting money around in informal markets. So I think for me, like you were saying, there are opportunities in the problem. So what do we as corporates do? I think one, there's an element of leadership. Corporates exist as part, of a full system. And we have a responsibility for our own sustainability. The markets that we are in have to be sustainable environments to do business in. So there is no Unilever that can exist when there is no youth to sell to. There's no security in what we do when crime is an issue. So we need to get involved in the problems of society, education, hygiene. All of those things are things that we can get involved in. So one, I think there's a leadership responsibility and a mandate to understand that we are a big part of how economies grow in these countries that we're in. Secondly, I think diversity is a key one as well within the organization, because you can only find the Zuzis, you can only find beauty on tap if there are people who are diverse enough to be seeing these things, right? Like, I have a very young team that I lead, and I'm intentional about that, right? Because I'm not as digitally native as some of the people who are in my team. But if I'm building a platform called Cleanopedia, which is a digital-only brand, that is supposed to become the biggest platform, cleaning platform in this country on TikTok, if I don't live in that space, if I don't understand the language, how am I going to win? So bringing in people who know what the problems are, who know how to solve them, who speak, what the language is important, right? But then to also be partners to the progress. So if I think of it, and I'll make an example, most recent example that comes to my mind is Timon, which is one of these projects that Unilever have currently embarked on, where for us, getting chilies and cinnamon as a plant was important to our localization agenda. The only issue is some of the suppliers we're approaching just couldn't make it at the consistent quality that we required, didn't have some of the skills that we needed, and didn't have the scale that we required, right? So we invested with those communities in order for that to happen, right? So I think there was a 30 million rand upfront investment into getting a steam sterilizer. Was at the time, I think, was only available in India and one other market. Just being a partner to that 30 million investment has already in this year given us 100 million rands worth of spend and turnover, with that company. And of course, it's going to pay itself off in multiple ways, whether it's the communities of those farmers who are now getting more money, whether it's the sale of our chilies and cinnamon that will be more affordable for us because we're not bringing stuff in, we're creating it for ourselves. So it's a partnership. There's no one-way answer to it. But I think if you are an entrepreneur, be ready, stay ready, because you never know, you're never gonna know when the opportunity is gonna be there. But look to solve problems, because we're all partnering with people who are solving problems and can show us that they have a credible history of doing that, whether they have the money or not.
I think perhaps to add to that, if you are inside corporate, is to be the advocate for policy change as well, right? Because yes, corporates have policies and they guide how we do business, but they're not rigid. So one of the things that you can do if you see opportunities to be that advocate for policy change, whether it's changing the policies in terms of how the corporate buys services, whether then it's services in terms of partnerships that you bring forth, because I think that's where you open up opportunities for people or even businesses that traditionally would never qualify to work with those corporates. And I think that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Telkom is one, the willingness and openness of the organization to find opportunities, but also to listen to those advocates within the business. So use your voice and be an advocate, because I think to Liz's point, the people there may not necessarily see that the policy is not enabling because they don't live in the spaces where you see that opportunity. So if you live in those spaces and you see that opportunity, bring it back into the business to drive that change. But I also want to say thank you for the recognition, because I think one of the things, and I think this is something that as Brand SA you should be aware of, is there's a negative narrative around state entities. Yes, we are no longer classified as an SOE because we are a publicly listed company. But I think there's also one key thing that people forget about the value that state entities have brought into this country. And I think particularly, maybe it's because I lived to see it, and I was actually a beneficiary of it, is the contribution into the engineering and technology space that state entities have done for South Africa. The companies that have brought or developed the most engineers in this country, it's Eskom, Telkom, and Transnet, in the different fields of engineering. And I challenge you to go and look at the stats. I think if you look at the bursary schemes of just those entities in the late 90s into the early 2000s, most of the engineers at Eskom come from bursaries. I mean, most of the engineers in the country, not just Eskom, whether it's in mining and different spheres, as a result of the bursary investment that companies like Telkom, Eskom, and Transnet made. I think if you look at Transnet particularly, they've got how many engineering disciplines that they deal with. They had engineers that were dealing with the trains, engineers that were dealing with the fiber lines that the trains run on. They've got engineers from a mechanical point of view who had to fix the trains and locomotives. I started out in Petronet, which was chemicals, right? We moved literally Petronet, which is part of, I think they now call Transnet Pipelines. They move fuel, petroleum, throughout South Africa and into the connecting countries. So literally most of the half of sub-Saharan Africa depends on Petronet moving the fuel into those countries. So if you think about that, I think there's a narrative that we actually have to, and I think I'm glad that you bring it up in terms of skills development, and I don't want to just limit it to Telkom, because I know the contribution of the other state entities. Whether they still do it and contribute as much is questionable, but I think they really built the foundation that we all are actually enjoying the benefits of now.
Thank you. Rarely am I in a room where the SOEs receive a round of applause. Amazing stuff. We are only taking the questions that we noted. So unfortunately, because of time, we're just going to have to take the rest of the questions during our networking at the end. So I know there was a hand over here that was Yes. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? How are you? My name is Lungile and I am a farmer. So thank you so much, Cicely, for answering partially my question with regards to investing to farmers. However, the challenge is that the color of our skin, as Sbusiso has said. I want to ask from Telkom, I know that you recently launched a digital platform for wine farmers that are working with you in February, but there's not a lot of my skin color wine farmers in the country. And with you, Sbusiso, I want to ask with regards to the business investments and the loans that you offer at African Bank. Does it include agriculture? And to Usis Gugu with Sbusiso, is there any future plan with partnering that maybe Telkom does? Because we have modernized farming where we don't need a lot of space, which I'm in part of them. I'm doing hydroponic farming. So that we use those spaces where we get mentored into the technology and we can get the loan from you guys and then we can supply Usis Elizabeth. I don't know if I'm making sense.
She's got her entire value chain sorted right here. Am I correct in saying that should be the next question is the last question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Yannick. I come from an advertising technology background, still in advertising technology. But I've got a brand question. You have both the blessing and the curse of being in very old industries, right? By being a heritage brand, communication and finance. I'm talking to Gugu and Sbu. And over the last 15, 20 years, unlike me, I mean, advertising technology is like it was born yesterday. So over the last couple of years, there was an acceleration in terms of the overlap in both industries. While you've got mobile money being driven by a lot of telcos, you've got microcredit being offered by some telcos, you've got banking moving into the MVNO, I think, mobile virtual network space, and still offering finance, microfinancing, going even micro in terms of financing. How are you dealing with that? How are you tackling that from a brand positioning and a brand promise point of view?
Thank you. Let's maybe start with Sbu, and if we can end with you, Sisku. Guys, Sbu Katele. You ask him. Pardon?
Start with the lady,
Yes.
agriculture.
Yes, agri-tech.
First of all, I think it's quite inspiring that you're tackling this industry, this wine industry. It's a huge industry. I hope you export some of it.
No, I'm not farming.
You know, oh, okay, lovely, lovely. Sure, no problem. But it's actually, farming is a very tough business. So I hope you do go back in there and you make it happen. But do come to us, please. So the answer is yes. It's a simple answer is yes. And we're often in the same places, and we do talk about collaboration, and we do talk about how we could work together. So we must just make it happen. Yeah.
Oh.
The gentleman was, I think it was.
It was the collaboration.
Partially,
yes.
Attached to both of us. In terms of the old and the new and the bridge. So most of these businesses that are, tech enabled and they're doing some, either a bit of banking and a bit of transactions and credit, they're actually enabled by the bigger banks. So MTN has Momo Money. That's African Bank. ShopRite has an account that really is African Bank. So banks provide the regulatory platform and the technology platform to enable other brands to work to have a layer of customer and user experience, but that's sitting on a technology base that's robust and that's governed quite robustly. So that's the way we're able to continuously allow ourselves to play in spaces using other brands and collaborating with other brands where we really don't have to take our brand there, but we take our expertise there. And I think a lot of that actually happens. So we might have a virtual mobile network, but it's powered by Telkom. But we're offering our customers within the ecosystem an ability to have mobile technology, and it really lowers the cost of doing business. But on the question that was asked earlier about what corporates could do, you know, I intercepted an email recently, about a month ago, coming from procurement, and it had to do with an RFP for, we were looking for a service provider to do a travel service provider. So whenever we traveled inside African Bank, they booked the flights and everything. So, and I just responded and I said, but in business banking, we've got a car rental company called Pace Car Rentals. That is really a gentleman who used to work at Spur, started a business, got funding from African Bank. He's built a R1 billion business, small, family orientated. It's called Pace Car Rentals. So I lost it and I said, why are we not supporting them? Why are we going to rent cars from wherever? Because if we could create an ecosystem with our own customers, so if someone banks with us, what do they do that we need that we could, you know, procure from them and do the same? And, you know, so I think that's what corporates can do. Corporates need to look, if any bank has 10 million customers, amongst those 10 million customers, someone is selling toilet paper, find out who it is and buy the toilet paper from them. Someone is selling sugar, find out who it is, buy the sugar in the canteen from them. If we could be able to open up the markets and create a marketplace within that ecosystem, it benefits the customer. Then you've got a real reason to say, when I go and bank with African Bank, I'm not only giving them my business, but I'm also getting business from them.
100%. Can I just can I add one other thing to that question? Sorry, because you just sparked a thought. Making sure that we also have preferential terms, for small businesses, because we acknowledge that you are not the bigger, you know, giant of a business that we've been doing business with that has liquidity, that can have payment terms that are like 45 days. Pay 90 days. So paying small suppliers quicker. Secondly, leverage. I think I'm pushing it there, but okay, challenge accepted. But also also using your influence to drive that systematic change. Because sometimes it is about, we can see the potential, but the scale of, or the volume of the work that I require will probably break your business. How do I then allow access to somebody who's been doing business with us, so that there can be a skills transfer, so that we can diversify our spend pools? So how do I insist in my value chain on media, as an example, that there are black media owners, that Unilever puts its spend with? That is using your power to systematically drive change within an organization, because that's what we're there to do. So I think that's another thing that we could do as corporates.
Cool. Just coming back to then the agri-tech and the cross category trends. I think on the agri-tech, So perhaps how you look at it is we had a willing customer, right? So we build a solution, there's a willing customer, and we should then look at it as that willing customer is actually doing the testing for the rest of the farming community, because it's not just about wine farms. It's monitoring IoT devices that monitor any type of crop. It depends on, I guess, the metrics of the crop that get coded into these IoT devices, and then it can be expanded beyond that. So because we had a willing customer that has the money to back it up, they were willing to run the POCs with us. But the intention is that we can then grow it and scale it up to be relevant to farmers of different type of farming, whether it's crops or even livestock, because I think you would be aware that there are IoT devices that do monitoring, health monitoring of livestock. So hopefully you'll be one in future that will benefit from the work that we've started. And I think coming to the cross-category collaboration, because I think to Sbu's point, it's actually collaboration, but in the consumer's eyes, it doesn't look like that, right? Because the consumer doesn't know the intrinsics of what goes on behind the scenes. So MVNOs don't have the license from the regulator. The telcos own the licenses. So when African Bank opens an MVNO, they cannot, as a bank, receive a ENCS license, but Telkom owns it, so they have to then leverage what we have. But I think looking at it beyond just the cross-collaboration is, as an entity, you are actually extending value for the consumer. Because I think when you look at it, whether it's our customers seeking insurance services from us rather than approaching insurance companies or the banks, they're seeking value. They're seeking us extending the value beyond just the connectivity into other parts of their whether it's lifestyle or other parts of their needs, depending on the need state. So it's about thinking about how do you extend value for your customer, therefore going out to seek the right partnerships that will allow you to do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can agree. In the beginning, I said we are expecting to learn, to get a lot of new knowledge, and I think there was a lot of new information that, I mean, myself, I was learning as I was sitting here from each and every one of the storytellers. So definitely knowledge. Was there inspiration? Yeah. And a lot of nostalgia, I think I also experienced. And might I add, if there were politicians, they would have won the election by now, every one of these three. But certainly seeds into the future have been planted. I mean, we're talking about the Township Exchange here. Some bold ideas, and it would be amazing to see into the future if there were any seeds that would have been planted here that somebody is going to nurture and keep pushing, like the founders of an African bank once did for 10 years until the beginning. Where's Pat? I'm trying to look for him.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. I think it's definitely needed by the amount of engagement, and thank you everyone for being engaging and being receptive to the storytellers sharing their brand stories and giving us ideas into the future.
All right. Yeah. So in my culture, or in my mother tongue, there's a saying that says, "As zonke." Those who get it, get it. If you don't get it, danko. Can I just say, this was by far the best Pattern Brands dialogue we've had in the 6 years. And I'll tell you why. Number one, of course, we had Telkom as a partner. But number two, I'm sure you understand why we emphasize bringing in people that have experience, that have journeyed, not just influencers or LinkedIn influencers, but people that have walked the path, right? And those are the people that as young marketers we can really learn from and also model our careers around. And I think they were so generous in not just sharing their experiences, but also, I must say, as you walk out here, you'll be surprised. There's a lovely gift coming out of Unilever, you know, and nice goodie bag there. But they were very generous in their knowledge, in their time, You know, these are busy people. They've got families. They could have, you know, had nice dinner elsewhere, but they chose to be with us today and share their experiences with us. And I think for that, we need to give them a big round of applause. Oh, standing ovation. Okay. Yeah, man, this it was really beautiful. And as a little token of appreciation here, I know you guys need to declare, you know, and all of that. We'll take a picture. So our next event will be the summit next year, the Business to Brand Summit. And of course, the Yobas are still happening. Those that do not know the Yobas, they're actually a platform that celebrates and recognizes brands that are owned and run by the youth. So as you can see, there's a common thing in this Pattern Brands entity, brand building, because we believe that by building strong brands as South Africa, as a country, we're going to create job opportunities, but also we're going to have a positive image in the global spaces. So, guys, please, if you haven't subscribed to the Pattern Brands platform, please do so. YouTube, everywhere else. And I thank you. Get home safe. There's plenty of food as well outside. Please make sure you eat because, again, we had a generous partner here. So let's indulge. There's drinks and, yeah, get home safe.
Our legacy, our connections, our brand, turned on. Telkom. Our legacy, our connections, our brand, turned on. Telkom.